So I've had a couple of MSI Optics G274QPF32 panels on my gaming setup for a long time now. They're 1440p, 165Hz, they've got some lovely colour reproduction, and I've been pretty happy with them all this time. I even made a video about them around this time in 2022, so the card will be in the corner now. God, has it been that long already? Anyway, MSI has reached out again and asked me if I wanted to check out their new G274QPFE2 gaming monitor. And I must say these model numbers are getting just a tad ridiculous now. So you know what, I'm probably not going to say that model number again throughout this video because, well, it would just sound absolutely horrific saying it again and again. But I've had the panel on my desk for a little while now, and I wanted to talk about it. So MSI's new IPS display, well, rapid IPS display they're calling it now, but more on that in a moment, can produce a resolution of 2560 by 1440p. It is slightly faster than my last screens at 180Hz, which isn't hugely noticeable, I suppose. But if you're coming from a 120Hz or below monitor, then you're probably going to see a significant difference. It's HDR400 and it has adaptive sync technology, which activates within a range of 48 to 180Hz. It's got some small bezels, bezel-less they call it, and around the back it's rather plain. There is no RGB like on my last one, which is fine because it is the back and you don't really see it. The face mount is a little frustrating though, around back at 75 by 75, so it's not compatible with my current wall mount, which is why I currently have it sitting on a stand. And underneath you've got a DisplayPort 1.4a, two HDMI 2.0Bs, which unfortunately can only hit a max refresh rate of 144Hz. There is a USB Type-C port that's capable of displaying and charging your laptops at 15 watts, and there is also a headphone out port. The stand is pretty much plastic, and the base plate is just an ugly black slab, which is a bit of a shame. There is no finesse here, but it does keep the cost down, I suppose. You've got a basic cable management hole too in the arm, so there is that. And there is a joystick for navigating the menu, which is lovely, and everything here is what you'd expect with an MSI panel, including your gaming options, which house your game mode, shadow control, overdrive settings, and all of that kind of thing. You've got your professional controls, which is there for your image mode, you know, things like low blue light mode, MPRT activation and HDR activation settings. And finally, and most importantly, your image settings, which house your brightness, contrast, sharpness, and color temperatures, of which I stuck to normal, by the way, in this test. Kicking things off with the monitor's color gamut, in its sRGB mode, it achieved a 100% sRGB gamut, 76% Adobe RGB, 78% P3 and 71% NTSC gamuts, but switching this to its office mode, it pushed to 87% Adobe RGB, 91% P3 and 84% NTSC. So you do get a better gamut when switching picture modes here. However, looking at the color accuracy in sRGB mode, it hit an average delta E of 0.72, which is great, and a maximum of 5.28. In office mode though, color accuracy fared terribly with an average delta E of 8.67, which is high, and a maximum of 12.8, which is super high. Now it does seem like the panel is favoring brightness in this mode over colors because yes, while the screen is brighter, assuming that is to combat things like harsh lighting in office environments, things do look a little bit washed out, and user mode, in either case for color gamut and color accuracy, fared no better either. So I did stick to the sRGB mode for the majority of my testing. Moving on to brightness and contrast, it achieved a max brightness of 484 nits with a contrast ratio of 1340 to 1 and a white point of 6700, which is very nice and close to that 6500 midpoint, which can actually be achieved if you do drop the monitor brightness down to 25%, though you do lose out on contrast ratio, to be expected. Color uniformity at 100%, brightness also unfortunately really performed horrifically with issues running down the left hand side of the panel, and it not really getting much better towards the top right hand side either. And dropping this to 50% saw a more even spread across the panel, but still had a hotspot in the center. In reality though, this didn't really prove to be a problem while playing games, and things like Overwatch 2 looked quite saturated and sharp, so maybe an anomaly or something the human eye just can't pick up, I'm really quite unsure. Luminance uniformity at 100% brightness again saw issues down that left hand side, and even at 50% there were still problems being had. Again, not something that was really noticeable in real world scenarios. Moving on to testing the panel with the OSRTT tool, you'll easily see from these results which overdrive setting or response time setting as MSI call it in their menu is best. Starting with normal at 180Hz, Its grey-to-grey response time fared not great, as the initial time sat at 8.34 with a 13.33% in window. However, in this setting, it claimed that there was zero RGB overshoot whatsoever, which I find slightly hard to believe. Moving on to fast, things did look slightly better, with a G2G response time of 5.06 and a 53.33% in window. However, I did see some RGB overshoot come into play here with an average error of 3.1, but this is really a negligible amount and not worth worrying about in this mode. When it got to the fastest response time, we saw an average initial response time of 3.17, which was good, but only spent 3.33% in window. This also was the same kind of story with the RGB overshoot, which saw an average error of 33.33. Now, this was all a bit of a shame to see, because MSI is claiming their rapid IPS panel technology is supposed to have a super fast 1 millisecond G2G response time, but it's not the answer I got here. One thing I did find strange though with my OSRTT tool, however, is because the MPRT mode dims the backlight quite considerably, I wasn't able to gain a reading due to backlight strobing, and this mode could be responsible for that 1 millisecond response time that MSI are claiming. But this actually translated rather well on a UFO ghosting test, where the fast mode at 180 Hz performed best out of the 3 overdrive settings, and the fastest produced a severe amount of ghosting, even though its grey-to-grey response time was technically the best. Now, I would, after seeing these results together, trade for the ever so slightly slower G2G response time in favour of a clearer image when it came to ghosting. However, I must say that if you ran the monitor on NPRT mode, which stands for moving picture response time, it gave quite a sharp result. But unfortunately, the darker the image got, the more noticeable the blur and even overshoot got, which can be seen in the images on screen. The other thing to consider as well is that if you have got MPRT switched on, you can't use adaptive sync at the same time. But getting into some gaming, I must say I do feel like the MSI panel performed pretty well. I was not really left wanting more, and to be honest with you, coming from my slightly slower, though much older 165 Hz MSI panels, it felt like a brighter and more welcome upgrade. And playing some Overwatch 2 just looked really nice, and I must say to the naked eye, or well, someone with my eyesight and perception anyway, it wasn't really a bad experience. And playing slower story-driven games like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, which I've just downloaded, did look really vivid and colourful. Maybe I'm just a bit biased for MSI monitors, I don't know. I have had 2 on the desk now for the best part of 5 years, and they've done me an absolute turn. But I've got to say that I've been pretty impressed with the presentation of games I've seen so far in this panel. And what I must say I have noticed between this and my older MSI monitor sitting here, which you probably have noticed too throughout this video, is the fact that it's just so much brighter to the eye. Maybe not as saturated in color though, but it's definitely more vivid. Bleed, however, as explained earlier, does come into play here, especially in darker scenes. And yes, I know these photos have been taken with my phone, so it is vastly exaggerated compared to viewing the screen with the naked eye, but it does give you an idea of why I got the results I did before. All in all though, it isn't a bad panel at all, and I just want to say now that not all of these results really mirrored the experience that I've had with this panel. Yes, the test results look a bit like a red flag, but playing through the games I have and seeing what I have with this panel, it does look really nice for gaming and media. The colors do look really nice, and though the bleed looked bad and the color uniformity looked really off in my data color tests, it just didn't translate. Well, I didn't think it did anyway. When you're zipping around a game of Overwatch, it looked fantastic. But you've got to remember it's a £230 monitor, or that's what I saw on Amazon at the time of making this video, so please do take that into consideration as well. It's probably classed as a budget range monitor at this point, considering mid-range monitors now are priced closer to the £500 mark. At £230, yeah, I would say it falls more in line with budget monitors. It's vastly cheaper as well than what I paid 3 years ago for my current MSI panel, so there is that too.